Thamalakane River, early afternoon. A young elephant lies on her side at the muddy bend, legs stiff, her shoulder pressed against the slope where the dry grass gives way to stone. Her skin, usually thick with color, has turned a dry, gray pale. Each breath is shallow, faintly lifting the dust beneath her flank. There is no herd nearby, no protective circle, no shadow of movement in the distance, only her body, half slumped into the soft river silt, and the occasional flick of her ear. Slow, uncertain. Jacob spotted her from the opposite bank. He had been walking the floodline, marking drift trails after a late rain. At first, he thought she was dead. Then he saw her side twitch, barely rising. He crossed the shallow span with quiet steps, boots pressing into the reeds. Her eyes were open, but dull. Not tracking, not blinking. A bird landed near her hind leg and pecked at the ground. She didn't move. He knelt, staying 2 lengths away. The ground here was soft, warm from the midday heat, but there was no shade. Her body had begun to gather heat, not from exertion but from the stillness of too many hours without cover. Jacob raised his radio and spoke the call in short, low words. One elephant, no herd, breathing, but minimal response, possible dehydration, unknown cause. She did not flinch at the sound. That worried him more than if she had. Jacob eased a bottle of water from his pack and poured it gently into a shallow fold in the earth nearby. The scent reached her first, her trunk curled faintly, rising half an inch from the dirt before falling again. He waited, watching. Her ribs rose once, then again, but she didn't lift her head. He took a few slow steps closer, crouching low so she could see the motion without threat. Her eyes moved, barely. He murmured once, "It's okay," a phrase more for rhythm than content. Her ear twitched, a thin slice of response, but she remained down. The minutes stretched. He checked her breathing again. Still shallow, but present. Her left leg, bent awkwardly under her chest, trembled once, then stilled. There were no visible wounds, no breaks, no blood. But her feet were caked in dry earth and her skin bore long lines of salt, the traces of dried sweat from the days before. She hadn't collapsed today. She had been here a while. The vet team would take time to arrive. Jacob began clearing the brush nearby to make space. Each time he looked up, the elephant had not moved. Her trunk shifted once, toward the water, then back. Not far enough to reach. Not enough strength. He filled a bowl and set it a little closer. Still no movement. The choice was simple. If she stayed down, she would not survive the heat. If she rose too soon, her legs might give in and injure her further. The safest option was stillness, but even that held danger. If they waited too long, her organs might begin to fail. Jacob stayed crouched, quiet. The river moved beside them, a slow thread of brown against the stone. A dragonfly hovered near the edge of the water bowl. The elephant's eye followed it briefly, then closed halfway. When the backup team arrived 40 minutes later, Jacob waved them silent. "She's alive," he said, "but barely." His voice held no urgency, only fact. The vet nodded and began prepping fluid bags. Still, the elephant did not rise. Her body remained in that same angle, sun-marked, breath thin. Life balanced quietly between staying and slipping. No one moved too fast. No one made noise. The first bag of saline was placed near her back leg. Her ear flicked once as it touched the ground. The risk was unchanged. If she didn't drink or lift her head by nightfall, the damage might become irreversible. If she panicked during treatment, her strength would drain too fast. Jacob placed one hand softly near the edge of her front foot, not touching, only resting close. She didn't move away. And as the sun dipped slightly lower and a breeze stirred the river grasses, her trunk shifted again. Slow, uncertain, rising just enough to press faintly against the dusted earth before falling still. The breeze along the Timalacane narrowed to a hush as the second vehicle rolled to a stop beneath the acacia edge. 2 veterinary assistants stepped out, followed by Dr. Naledi, a senior field vet accustomed to seeing collapse in buffalo, giraffes, and even older elephants, but not one this young. She approached slowly, reading the signs before words were exchanged. The elephant was breathing. She had not moved, and she was alone. The skin along her flanks had dried into ridges, pale with mineral crust. Her temples dipped slightly. Early signs of malnutrition, but not starvation. Naledi crouched a few meters away and studied her limbs. The knees had not buckled violently. There was no evidence of trauma, no swelling, no open wound. She had not fallen from a height. This wasn't an injury. It was something else. Jacob, still beside her, had cleared a semicircle of space in the grass, shaded now only by the slow crawl of the afternoon clouds. He gestured softly toward her feet. "She moved this one," he said, motioning to the back leg. "Just once." Naledi nodded. The elephant's eye opened slightly at the sound, then closed again. There was no fear in her, but no engagement either. It was not disinterest. It was exhaustion, deep and total. The assistants began checking temperature and drawing a small blood sample. She flinched once as the needle pressed her skin, but nothing more. Naledi glanced at the trunk, still curled close to her chin. It hadn't reached for water, hadn't tested the air. A worrying sign. They inserted a slow saline drip behind the shoulder fold. The solution moved gently through the line, cool against the heat-creased hide. Jacob adjusted a blanket beneath her chest to ease the angle of her ribs. Her sides rose more steadily now, but the breath remained shallow. She blinked again. Nothing else. Naledi spoke low. 8 years, maybe less. No lactation, no broken tusks, no bruising, and no herd nearby. That last note was the most troubling. Young elephants rarely leave a matriarchal group unless driven away, and females almost never. They scanned the banks. No fresh dung, no prints beyond her own. No rub marks on the trees. It had been days since any herd passed this stretch. The possibility took quiet shape. She may have wandered too far during foraging and been forgotten in the dark. Or she could have been separated by a river swell, the kind that confuses scent trails and erases sound. Or she had been left, intentionally, by a herd sensing weakness. Elephants grieve, but they also survive. By late afternoon, the saline drip had emptied. Her skin held slightly more elasticity. A second bag was prepared. Jacob sat cross-legged nearby, never touching her, never crowding her. Her trunk flicked once in the dirt, tracing a shallow line. The movement seemed involuntary. Naledi checked the eyes again. "Still responding," she said, "but just barely." If she could not rise by dusk, they'd have to consider using support harnesses. But lifting her too early might break something internally. If she stayed down, the weight of her own body would eventually crush muscle tissue and restrict circulation. The balance was unforgiving. Still, there was no cry of pain, no wild thrashing. Her stillness was not peace, but something more delicate, a choice between what she could endure and what she no longer had strength to resist. They covered her lightly with canvas to shield her from the last stretch of sun. As the sky turned pale orange and the air cooled, a single shift passed through her shoulders. A tremor, faint but real. Her ears lifted for the first time in hours. Not high, just enough to catch a sound. Jacob tilted his head, listening. A bird call. Then silence. The vet moved closer, quietly placing a fresh line of fluids. The elephant did not move away. She blinked. Once. Still no herd, no family scent, no echoing call from the trees. She was alone. But she was alive. The sun crept westward, flattening the shadows across the dry bed of the Tamalacane. The rest of the team rotated shifts, moving between the mobile unit and supply vehicle. But Jacob remained beside her. The young elephant had not lifted her head. Her legs were still folded beneath her, spine curved into the shallow slope where the reeds once grew thick. But her breathing had steadied. That was enough to stay. By mid-afternoon, the saline drip had slowed to a soft tick, emptying into her skin in quiet intervals. Her body had taken the fluid, but still showed no movement beyond the occasional blink or twitch of muscle. Naledi suggested waiting until cooler air before attempting further stimulation. Jacob nodded. He pulled his jacket from the cab and folded it beneath his legs, settling in beside her again, just out of reach. He didn't speak. There was no need. The temperature rose, then fell without event. Dust gathered around the edges of her flanks. Once, a hornbill flew low and landed briefly on a stone beside her shoulder, only to lift off seconds later. She didn't notice. But Jacob did. Every sound, every stir of wind, every gesture mattered now. Not because they were signs of progress, but because they marked the passing of time she didn't have in abundance. Near 5, he used a small spade to dig out a shallow bowl from the softest patch of mud, packing the sides with his hands. He filled it twice with clean water from the tank and let it settle. Then he moved back again, watching. Her trunk remained curled under her neck, unmoving. By dusk, the sky turned the color of dusted copper. The vet team packed for overnight rotation, leaving Jacob with the night watch brief. If she stood, call immediately. If she panicked, step back. But if she remained like this, stay calm, keep her shaded, and wait. He stayed seated through sundown. The insects returned. So did the cold. The air lost its weight. Her breathing stayed quiet but unchanged. She hadn't cried out. Hadn't called to the bush. No one had answered either. The silence of a missing herd carried more weight than sound. Jacob stirred when a low groan rippled from her chest. Not loud, not pain, just effort. Her ears twitched once. Her right leg shifted slightly, sliding down the slope by a few inches. It was the first voluntary motion since morning. He leaned forward. Her eyes opened wider this time, catching the dim light. Then, slowly, her trunk lifted. Not far. Just enough to clear the dust. It hovered, uncertain, then traced the air near her chest and stretched outward toward the bowl. It didn't reach. She paused, lowered it. I tried again. This time the tip dipped gently into the edge of the mud-lined trough. Not a full drink, not a desperate pull. Just one soft touch. The surface rippled, catching the last line of light from the sky. Jacob exhaled slowly. That was all. No applause, no reaction. Just quiet recognition. She was still here. The trunk retracted and fell gently across her jaw. Her eyes closed again. Not fully, not in surrender. Just rest. The signal was clear, even if brief. She had not given up. She had not yet gone. And now, as the stars blinked one by one into the sky, Jacob leaned back on his jacket, pulled his knees to his chest, and waited. The earth around them cooled. The vet team's tents lit faintly from a distance, but the ground where they lay remained still, joined by the faint sound of water settling back into the bowl. Proof, however small, that something had shifted. Before sunrise, the riverbank held its breath. The wind moved low across the grass, brushing the dust from night-cooled earth. A soft mist lingered where the slope met the water, but it didn't reach the elephant's body. She had not moved. Her side rose and fell, slow and steady, but her legs remained folded, her neck slack against the soil. Jacob hadn't slept. His jacket was still beneath him, damp now from dew. The water bowl, half full, hadn't been touched again. A faint line in the mud marked where her trunk had once rested, then withdrawn. That was hours ago. No more effort since. No more sound. At first light, Naledi returned. She crouched quietly beside the elephant's hind legs and ran her hand just above the skin. There was no swelling, no heat, but the joints didn't flex when touched. She checked the tension at the hip. No break, but stiff. Almost locked. The elephant blinked once, slow and dull. "She's not paralyzed," Naledi said slowly, "but she's weak. If it were trauma, there'd be swelling. This is something else." Jacob nodded, not interrupting. Naledi reached for the blood work results folded in her bag. Low sodium, low potassium, marginal calcium. None fatally out of range on their own, but combined, and in a body this young, they could strip muscle control, especially after long isolation. No herd meant no guidance to water, no elders to break mineral-rich roots, no communal access to mud holes. Her body had been running on emptiness for days. "We'll try a mineral blend through the drip," Naledi said. "Slowly. She's not strong enough for volume." By 7, the first line had started. The needle pressed gently into the fold behind her ear. No flinch, no withdrawal. Her skin accepted the line without protest. Jacob shifted closer, still not touching, and reached for his canteen. He poured more water into the trough beside her trunk, careful not to splash. She didn't reach, but she blinked. Her ears twitched faintly. Left, then right. The sun climbed, bringing heat with it. Naledi signaled for a thin sheet to shade her back. The fabric draped lightly over her shoulders, weighted at the corners with small stones. Her breathing remained even, but there was still no motion from her legs. Not even a stretch. Jacob leaned forward, one arm across his knees, watching her eyes. They had dulled during the night, not lifeless, just distant, like looking through fogged glass. He whispered, barely above breath, "Stay. Just stay." A habit now, not hope, but when the words left his mouth, her eye shifted toward him. Not a full turn, just a flicker, the first in hours. She had heard. He didn't say anything more. She closed her eyes again. The vet team adjusted the flow rate of the mineral drip. No sudden changes, just gradual replenishment. Naledi noted the time. If her body responded by late afternoon, they might attempt gentle stimulation to lift her chest upright. But not before. If they pushed too soon, the risk of collapse was high. If she stayed like this too long, tissue damage would begin. Internal systems, especially digestion and blood flow, needed the pressure to shift. But the body would not move until the mind chose to try. It had been nearly 30 hours since she'd been found. Still no sign of herds, no calls in the distance. No scent trails. The silence wasn't just absence, it was confirmation. But she was still alive, and for the first time since yesterday morning, her eyes, however briefly, had responded. It wasn't a return, but it did not surrender either. By late afternoon, the heat had begun to soften. The clouds hung still over the Tamalacane, flat and pale, not offering shade but slowing the burn. The elephant remained down, her limbs stiff but no longer trembling. The mineral drip had continued through the morning, slow and measured, easing into her blood like a language returning after too long forgotten. Her ears moved more now, faint flicks toward sound. Her breathing had steadied, deeper, but she had not yet tried to rise. Jacob sat close again where he had always been, quiet, unmoving, watching. The canvas shade had been shifted once to adjust for the sun's angle. Her skin, though still dry, no longer cracked at the folds. Her flanks rose and fell with more purpose, but her eyes stayed half-lidded, alive but distant. The vet team stayed further back, knowing now that nothing mechanical would lift her from the earth. She would rise when she chose to, or not at all. A few minutes before 5, Jacob leaned in again, the way he had every hour. One slow breath to see if hers matched. His knee brushed the edge of the cloth covering her back, and he reached forward gently, squinting at her side. Then, without sound, without warning, her trunk began to move. It lifted slowly from beneath her jaw, curling up not in alarm, not in reflex, but with an odd grace. No one called out. No one moved. The air stilled as it rose, past her chin, over the shallow bowl of water, toward Jacob. He froze. The tip hovered, uncertain, swaying just once. Then it moved forward that last inch and pressed lightly against his cheek. Not a push, not a warning, just a resting weight. Warm, soft-edged, silent. Jacob didn't speak. He didn't shift. He let the trunk settle where it chose, across the side of his face, near his eye, along the line where the skin was still cool from shade. The touch held there, breathing against him. It wasn't an accident. Her eyes opened wider. No one else in the clearing moved. Naledi lowered her hand mid-gesture and watched, her chest held tight. One of the assistants, kneeling by the medkit, stopped moving altogether. The trunk stayed for a long breath. Then another. And only then did it fall, slowly, as if the last of her effort had been spent in that one decision. It lowered back to her chest and coiled gently beneath her chin. Jacob remained still. His hand rose only after she withdrew, resting lightly over the place she'd touched. Eyes closed now. Not from emotion, but from stillness, as if the world had folded inward. The elephant's breathing slowed again. But it did not fade. That moment, brief, deliberate, marked a shift no machine could detect. She had chosen to reach, not for water, not in confusion, but toward something that had stayed. It changed nothing and everything. The silence afterward held longer than speech would have. She did not try to rise, but she had not given up. And now, with the sun beginning its tilt behind the clouds, the first night would fall not in waiting, but in knowing she was still here, still willing, still aware. The riverbed darkened early. Clouds settled low, dimming the last of the sun before it touched the water. Jacob lit no fire. The vet team moved in low voices, conserving batteries and motion. The elephant hadn't shifted again since the touch. Her trunk now lay coiled beneath her chin, still and restful. The fluid bags had emptied. They would not administer more until dawn. Her breathing had changed. Slower, fuller, but still she hadn't moved her legs. The muscles would take time. Naledi had warned that this might be the edge, a pause before strength returned, or the body gave in. Around midnight, the wind turned. Jacob stood alone near the slope, watching the horizon. Something had shifted in the air. No scent, no dust, but the sense of movement. Distant, deliberate, almost subterranean. Then came the sound. Low. Not thunder, not footfall, a rumble. It started faint, like the underside of the earth rolling once, then again. Jacob turned toward the western flats where the bush thinned out into dry brushland. The others heard it too. Naledi looked up from the log where she had been writing notes. She didn't speak. No one did. Another rumble followed. Closer, then silence. Then one more. Fuller, not a call, not alarm, but the deep, resonant tremor only an elephant's chest could make. Jacob stepped forward. The stars had thinned behind the clouds. Stillness returned, for minutes that felt stretched thin with waiting. Then, through the low rise of a bush near the bend, something moved. A shape, not wind-blown, not animal-small, but massive, slow, and certain. A silhouette against the night. It stepped from the brush without sound. One large female. Not old, but older than the collapsed one. Her head moved low, her stride careful, nose lifted not in search but in recognition. She crossed the field at a diagonal, not rushed, each step deliberate. Jacob stayed motionless as she neared. The team backed away without needing instruction. The standing elephant approached the edge of the riverbank, paused, then turned slightly, her path not toward the water, but toward the body lying motionless in the grass. There was no trumpet, no sound. The younger elephant remained where she had been all day, unmoved, eyes half-lidded, her flanks rising and falling. Then, barely audible, a breath escaped her mouth. A long, low exhale, closer to a sigh than anything else. The standing elephant stopped. That was all she needed. She stayed at that exact distance, 10 paces away. Not touching, not crowded, just being. Jacob stepped back into shadow, letting the moment fill the night. Naledi whispered, "It's her sister." No herd came after, no others, just the one. Perhaps separated, perhaps searching, perhaps something older and less explained. A knowing from far off, a thread pulled between them by something older than human understanding. They stood like that for nearly an hour, one lying, one waiting. Neither moved, but neither was alone now, and when the breeze picked up again, it carried a different weight. Not the silence of loss, but the quiet, steady pressure of presence returned. The first light broke behind the thornveld in a pale, silver line. The air was cooler than the day before, the kind that holds its breath before the heat arrives. Dew clung to the dry grass in tiny beads, beating along the elephant's hide like a second skin. She had not moved during the night, but she had not declined either. Her breathing was steady, her eyes open, and a presence stood near her side, still, watchful, constant. The older elephant hadn't left. Through the long, quiet hours of dark, she'd remained just out of reach, shifting only to reposition her feet or angle her head toward the breeze. She didn't sleep. She didn't call. She waited, close enough to be felt, far enough to be respected. When Jacob returned from checking the water line, he saw the first shift. The downed elephant's shoulder twitched, a sharp, brief movement that hadn't happened before. Not a tremor, not a spasm. A test. The kind of motion animals make before choosing effort. Her ears flicked twice, this time not from insects. Jacob paused, watching from the same place he had always stood, jacket still over his shoulder, breath shallow. Her front leg bent inward, curling slightly. The other followed. She paused, then pushed. The motion was weak. Her weight didn't lift, but the dirt shifted under her belly. A mark was left behind. The older elephant responded by taking 2 slow steps forward, stopping just beside her. Still silent. Her trunk brushed once across the younger one's flank. Not a pull, not encouragement, just contact me, like memory made physical. The sick elephant paused. Then I tried again. This time the front legs moved together, pushing against the ground. The muscles in her back tensed. Her rear legs stayed motionless, but her chest lifted half an inch from the earth. A breath left her mouth, loud, strained. Then she dropped back down. Naledi, standing at a distance, murmured, "That's good." But the older elephant stepped even closer now. Her feet planted firmly. She reached her trunk down again, this time touching the spine gently, holding it for just a breath. It wasn't forceful, but it was a gesture, grounding, reminding. The younger one's trunk curled upward once, hovered, then fell again. Her eyes blinked. Then came the third push. Legs folded, weight coiled, breath drawn, and then, with a groan of effort deeper than anything she'd made before, she lifted herself, first from the front, then halfway at the back. Her hind legs stumbled slightly, knees bending too far, but she steadied herself against the slope. Dust kicked up. Her body quivered. Then, she stood, not fully straight, not strong, but she was up. Shakily, uneven, her head low. Her breathing is sharp. The older elephant stepped closer again and touched her gently on the side, as if bracing her. The two stood there, flank to flank. Jacob exhaled and took a slow step back. Naledi lowered her eyes. No words passed between them. The younger elephant shifted her weight once, her right foot slid an inch forward. Her balance held. She did not fall. And now, the shape of the clearing has changed. There were no longer two figures. One collapsed, one standing. There were two elephants. Together. And Jacob, standing quietly by the water bowl he had dug 2 days before, knew it without needing proof. His part was done. The morning ripened slowly, warm and windless. The younger elephant stood with effort, but she stood. Her legs trembled with each shift, her breath came deep and audible, but she no longer sagged under her own weight. The older one, her sister, remained at her side, not leading, not coaxing, just near. They had not spoken in sound. They had not needed to. When the sun reached the edge of the trees, they began to move. The first step was careful. The second is stronger. The young elephant leaned into her shoulders slightly as she walked, her gait uneven, her joints unsure, but her footing held. The older elephant matched her pace without pause. Her trunk draped now and then across the other's back, not clinging, just touching. An anchor of presence, of return. No call signaled their leaving. No dramatic turn. They simply walked. Jacob stayed at the edge of the slope, near the water bowl that still held a finger of liquid from the night before. His hands rested loosely at his sides. He did not follow. The vet team stood further back, silent, their equipment already packed, but unmoving. All eyes on the two who now moved east. Their steps were slow, but in rhythm. One favoring her right side, the other steady on every foot. Dust lifted around them as they crossed the clearing. Not in clouds, but in soft wisps that curled behind like breath. As they neared the tree line, the younger elephant paused. Jacob noticed it before anyone else, a slight halt, a lean into her sister's side. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached her trunk out and touched the other's cheek. A simple, closing gesture. Then she continued. They vanished between the trunks in the same rhythm they had come into the morning with. Trunks brushing now and then, heads low, but lifted enough to see the path ahead. Jacob didn't speak. His breath was steady, though his heart beat with something quiet and sharp. The place where he'd sat for 2 days still held the outline of his knees in the dirt. The trough was almost dry. The canvas had fallen in one corner, flapping slightly in the faint wind that finally arrived. And on the side of his cheek, where her trunk had touched him the day before, a faint smear of dust remained, pale, silent, and unwashed. He didn't wipe it away. There was no ceremony, no final call. The elephants were simply gone, into the shade of trees that had waited for them to return. Behind them, the river moved again, not louder, but with purpose. And on its edge, the memory of a single touch lingered. Not as a story, but as something real, carried not in words, but in the space where silence had once lived.